Robert Litwak is Vice President for Scholars and Director of International Security Studies at the Wilson Center. He's also the author of this publication, Iran's Nuclear Chess, Calculating America's Moves. Rob, welcome to Now. And let me first ask you about the metaphor of a chess game.
Well, I mean, the metaphor really derives from the historical antecedents of chess, which are attributed either to India or to Iran. And it also opened the metaphor, to the notion of a long game. And I think we are engaged in a long game with Iran, because the core argument of the book is that the nuclear issue is a proxy for a more fundamental debate, a debate that's been in Iran since the revolution itself, whether Iran would be a revolutionary state or would become an ordinary country. And in America, it's been a proxy for the post 9/11 debate about whether the response to rogue states, which included Iran and its core group, necessitated changing regimes or changing their behavior. So it really opened the door. The metaphor worked, I think, to kind of open the door of this complex and subtle interaction between this proxy status on both sides, which really has confounded the negotiations.
And a lengthy game of chess. This has been going on for a long, long time. And you mentioned the various terminology, a revolutionary state, or a regular country, so-called regular country, rogue state, outlier. How important is this terminology in understanding Iran?
It's not some fetishism about language, but it's rather the kind of the policy approaches that are associated with those terms. So that in the case of Iran, former President Rafsanjani said, Iran must maintain its revolutionary values or it becomes an ordinary state. And there is a long distinguished literature on comparative revolutions. Revolutions over time kind of regularize themselves. And the states kind of accommodate and rejoin the system. You saw it with China. Iran really hasn't gone through that process. 35 years after their revolution. On the American side, the rogue term was a post-Cold War term, but it really took off after 9/11. And there the argument was that the threat posed by these states, Iran, Iraq, North Korea, etc., derived from the character of their regime. So therefore, just turning off the bad behavior was insufficient, because the bad behavior was inextricably linked to the character of the regime. That argumentation led into the Iraq War decision in 2003. And this persisting tension in debate, persisting tension has roiled the U.S. debate on how to respond to Iran. You see it present, of whether just changing the behavior is enough, and those who argue, no, it really, you have to talk about the regime itself, because it's not just the nuclear, it's state sponsorship of terrorism, it's human rights records, it's involvement supporting Hezbollah in the Middle East and causing creating instability. So this sort of structure of the debate on both sides is sort of the prism through which you should look at the nuclear issue. That's the core argument of the book.
And speaking of moves, it's almost as if Iran needs to settle internally how it views itself first before the rest of the world can sort of catch up.
That's the great unresolved question. And one hopes that kind of external pressure on core interest groups of the regime would lead it to a strategic calculation, as President Obama put it, that it should abide by international norms, rejoin the system. President Obama dropped the term rogue state, which was a unilateral American concept, instead calling Iran an outlier in terms of international norms. So President Obama did a reboot of U.S. policy toward Iran. On the Iranian side, this persisting tension is still evident in their approach to the nuclear question. The new president, Hassan Rouhani, was elected with a mandate to kind of resolve the nuclear question and sanctions.
A so-called centrist
a pragmatic centrist, yeah. But as we well know, the presidency in Iran is a weak institution. The individual calling the shots is appropriately named the supreme leader. And the supreme leader in the end will have to make a determination whether the political costs of an agreement, of signing an agreement with the great Satan and the other outside powers, in terms of the core interest groups that support and maintain the revolutionary regime in place, the Revolutionary Guard, etc., whether those political costs exceed the economic benefits of ending sanctions.
Is there a deal to be made? In other words, one where everyone can claim victory, or is this just another move in an endless game?
There is a deal to be had there, and I think there's a good one on the table for the Iranians if they could get to yes on that decision and overcome the impediments there, because Iran does not have an urgent necessity for a nuclear weapon. it has
As a defensive.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't face any existential threat requiring a weapon today. It's not like the Manhattan Project or Crash Program to get a weapon. So having the inherent option of a weapon that's inherent in its mastery of the nuclear fuel cycle, uranium enrichment, that is its strategic sweet spot. It doesn't need a weapon. And the deal the U.S. and the so-called P5+1, the permanent members of the United Nations plus Germany put on the table, would allow Iran to maintain some uranium enrichment capacity under inspections to ensure that a civilian nuclear program is not just a is not subterfuge for a nuclear weapons program.
And we're recording this discussion very close to the deadline for a potential deal. What are the implications if the deadline passes without a deal?
I think the three options are, deal, which I think is unlikely because in the time available, I don't see how Iran gets to kind of yes on this in terms of bounding their nuclear program. At the other end of the continuum, you have a breakdown of the talks. Both countries are invested politically in this, President Obama, President Rouhani. So you could see a rationale for maintaining the talks and trying to register progress made, more work to be done. I think if sticking my neck out here, the least likely is a kind of an early breakdown of the talks, that both sides would end in bitter recrimination. Might happen, but I think the odds are against it. What I argue in the book here is that a breakdown in negotiations doesn't necessarily mean a sprint by Iran toward the bomb. Breakdown doesn't mean nuclear breakout. And I kind of elucidate that theme in the book because Iran, again, does not have an urgent necessity for a weapon.
Beyond Iran and just in terms of nuclear power and nuclear weapons, is this a good test case for the spread of nuclear weapons globally?
It is a good test case. Fortunately, John Kennedy famously predicted a world of 35 nuclear weapon states in 1962 at the UN General Assembly. We don't live in that world because most states don't believe that they need nuclear weapons to address their security concerns. They're a member of an alliance where they have kind of the nuclear umbrella effect. They don't see that they need nuclear weapons. There's a handful of hard cases, the usual suspects, so to speak, North Korea, Iran, historically Libya and Iraq. Interestingly, though, and I do get into the comparative proliferation dimension here, North Korea tested in 2006. It's had three tests. And there's not been a cascade of proliferation in Northeast Asia. Japan, South Korea, they have relied on the U.S. alliance. And I think that the talk about Iran going nuclear and that generating a wave of proliferation, I'm not a nuclear pessimist in that respect.
Good. Well, if people would like to see this, they can come to the Wilson Center website and find out how to get a copy. Additionally, you're going to be doing an event here on the 21st at noon Eastern Time, and there will be a live webcast if you'd like to watch it, if you can't travel to the Wilson Center in person. And tell us quickly in 30 seconds what that event's about.
That event is really it builds on the analysis of the book, which is not pegged. The news peg, so to speak, is the negotiations, which the deadline is Sunday, and so the 20th. And
the event takes place on
Monday. So it's sort of a day after effect. The argument of this book doesn't rely on a particular. I'm not all in on one particular outcome. Here, it's really. I view it very much as a Wilson Center type of book, which is what is the context of the issue, looking beyond just the immediate to look at the assumptions that drive policy on both sides. And that really is the main focus of the book, this embedded or proxy status of the nuclear issue on the Iranian side and on the American side. And it's that dimension of it that's not been well elucidated, and certainly not the interaction between the two of them. So I believe in that respect, this is a novel publication.
Well, thanks, Rob. I always learn something when I speak to you. You do provide that context.
Thanks.